What if the ocean knew you by name, and every polished railing, every heavy steel door, and every dark pane of glass on a cruise ship waited for you to walk past so it could whisper it back, soft as breath by cold as the deep, until you swore the ship itself had learned your heartbeat and was timing its creaks to match? Welcome back to my channel, Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. We are setting sail into stories that feel too precise to be invented and too cruel to be true. The kind of shipboard nightmares that start with a harmless detail and end with a choice you cannot undo. From a name that never appears on the passenger manifest, to a cabin door that opens where no hallway should exist, to an intercom that sings with the voices of things too large to see. Every story here's a mystery waiting to unfold. If you have ever felt the deck tilt beneath your feet long after the ship stopped moving, you already know how these nights begin. Listen closely, because the ocean collects secrets. Some wash up, most sink. A few come back when the anchors are raised and the bands are playing, and you only notice when the music stops between songs. Which story creeped you out the most? Let us know in the comments so I can find you on the next voyage. Story 1. The manifest's missing name on the day I vanished at sea. My name never boarded. I can still smell the citrus cleaner on the handrails and the sweet reek of sunscreen pulling on the blue carpet outside the gangway. The shitshorn gave that low animal moan that vibrated in my ribs. The atrium glittered had like a promise made of glass. My suitcase wheels chattered over a threshold strip, and I felt the tiniest thud, like the ship itself, caught the hemamia as I stepped through. Maybe that is when it learned my name, or decided I did not have one at all. Check, and should have been 2 minutes. I had the email from the magazine, the confirmation number, the little barker glowing on my phone. The agent wore a smile that made every teeth white, and crew photo. She scanned once, twice, then tilted her head the way people do when a magic trick fails, but the magician keeps smiling. She tried my last name. My first, the hyphenated version I never used. The screen stayed gray. She did not look up. It happens sometimes, she said eventually, like weather. A sync delay. You're on the list somewhere. Here is a generic card for now. She slid a blank white key card across and lowered her voice. Please do not share this until we confirm. She looked past me while she said it, as if speaking to the next person would make me less here. Up on deck 10, the ship felt like a hotel with permission to move. My cabin was cool and over-oxygenated, and the mirror above the desk had a bevel that made it look like a dark window. When I sat my suitcase down, the glass clouded for a second, like someone breathed on the other side and backed away. The air vent hummed. I had not showered. I held my breath, then laughed it off out loud, because sometimes you have to say you're fine before you are. I was here on assignment. A weekend sail, soft feature, 5 secrets you do not know about life on the water. I needed this check. My editor had moved my deadline twice as a favor. Lose this, and I lost rent. First night stories would always sell. I told myself this while I pressed the generic card to the light and watched it blink green. I did my rounds. Glass elevators. Pool deck with a salt air pushed at your back. At the buffet, I waved at a woman from the press list, Mia, who did the kind of travel rules that sound like poems read by a very caffeinated ghost. She hugged me and said she was glad I made it. We were worried. They said you were a late ad, she said. Do you still want to grab a drink before muster? She said muster like a joke, but glanced at her watch. The ship would sound the emergency drill at 515. Everyone had a show, even reporters. I asked the server where Lifeboat Station D was, and he looked at my card, and then at my chest I might have a badge pin there that explained me. My cabin number was printed above a barcode, but the line where a name should be was blank. He smiled to me and pointed to a sign I could already see. It was a small thing, but it set the first stone in the long, narrow path. Mustard thrummed through the ship like a test of who belonged. The sun leaned low and made a syrup of the light. We stitched shoulder to shoulder under lifeboats that gleamed chalk white and smelled faintly of rubber and something older. I crew member scan cards, calling names that answer back like spells. When she scanned mine, the scanner blanked red and then blue and then nothing. She did not call any name. She did not call anything at all. Hold for a moment, she said, and her smile did a tiny twitch. She waved the next person through and avoided my eyes, as if eye contact would make the problem real. I waited with the hum of the ship and the quiet, the familiar ache of being almost explained. "Der Station ist full. You'll be overflowed to 12. She said, checking a laminated sheet. She touched her headset. 12, she repeated. She pointed down the deck past the last boat. The metal underfoot rang with footsteps that did not feel like mine. "There's no Lifeboat 12, I said, but not out loud. The deck plan on the wall showed 11 lifeboats and a crew lunch. 12 was printed on my mustard slip anyway, an ink black number in a box that did not exist. I heard the whisper of it, 12, as if the ship like how it felt in its teeth. When the horns barked the all clear, Mia was gone. So was the crew member with the headset. Everyone flowed back toward drinks, casinos, dinners, the small rehearsed joys. I stayed a second too long under the last lifeboat, watching the blank space after it, trying to imagine a boat tied there as a secret. The stainless steel bracket gleamed. There were both holes and a clean outline where something once had been. Blank like my card, the first real wrong thing happened back in my cabin. I had left the air at a cool hum. The room was warm now, and the mirror over the dust ripped a soft blow and moisture that traced the bubble like a fog window on a cold bus. While I wiped it with my sleeve, letters showed street beneath. I curved little R, the tall shoulder of an H. Not written from my side. I froze, and the ship hummed, and the letters bled away into a shine. My name was not on the manifest, but here, across the glass, it was trying to write itself anyway. I propped the bathroom door open so steam from the shower could be my answer later if I wanted it. This is a trick you learn when you travel too much. You leave yourself plausible reasons. You build a ramp back to normal like a bridge you can cross without looking down. Dinner was a reminder that the easiest way to become unreal is to be inconvenient. The hostess asked for my name for the reservation list, and the pause after I said it was so brief you would miss it if you were not listening for breath. She stared at the tablet, skirled, and then smiled at a space over my left shoulder. "We can seek you at the bar," she said, not because she could, but because bars are for strays. The bartender had the kind face of someone who knows what hiding looks like. He poured me a soda before I asked and slitted paper receipt with no lying for a name. When I told him I was comped with the press group, he nodded and waved it away. "You're good," he said. "Keep that card safe." He touched the blank side with a fingertip like he could feel where a name should be. When I asked him about Lifeboat 12, he pretended the ice machine had his attention and then said he had not heard me. "You will think I was being dramatic. You will think I saw patterns because I wanted a story. I did not want the story." The next odd thing came at the elevator when a tiny boy pushed the button 12 times and said, "It only listens if you make it." His mother laughed and pulled him back. The elevator came and went and left my floor behind as if it had other plans. I took the stairs and listened to my heart count down something I could not name. The door to my cabin would not turn green. It glowed a lazy red and beat an unfriendly beep. The generic card felt warm in my hand. I tried again twice, 3 times. The fourth try made the light do nothing at all. Dead. When I went down to guest services, the line looked like an apology reformatted as a queue. The woman at the desk smiled until she saw my card, then did not stop smiling, which was worse. "Sometimes tickets get uploaded without a corresponding profile," she said. "You were added by marketing. They will correct it." She slid a printed letter toward me with a sharp and manicure. "Administrative error," the header said. "We apologize for any confusion. Please sign below to confirm your understanding that you will be disembarking at the first port for proper documentation. A generous credit it will be applied." The signature line was a thin black mouth waiting to swallow something it could not pronounce. "What if I do not sign?" I said. She kept the smile. "Then security will escort you to the same understanding," she said politely. "Dinner reservations remain available." When I stepped back from the desk, a man in an officer's uniform passed close enough that his sleeve brushed my arm. He did not look at me. He had the soft, exhausted stare of someone walking the ship that did not want to be walked. The ship's model and the glass case by the stairs showed all love and lifeboats and neat little orange rows. When I leaned closer, my reflection leaned to pale in the fake caution. I could not help it. I watched my breath. The glass did not fog this time. My relief was so stupid it felt like a lie I was telling myself to sleep. I found me near the theater where they were rehearsing the safety demonstration. She stood with a group of influencers who looked like they had secret partnerships with sunlight. She saw me and raised her hand. Then her face changed shape, subtle as a shrug. She lowered her arm and turned to the woman beside her with an expression that said she had only been stretching. When I said her name, she smiled the way you smile at a stranger who moves toward you like they know a story you do not. "I am sorry. Do we know each other?" she asked. The sound engineer counted 7, 6, 5 with his fingers, and the safety host launched into a joke about life jackets. The words slid over us like oil. "I get that a lot," you said, already turning away, as if the direction she was facing gave her permission to forget me. Back in the corridor outside my room, a housekeeping cart blocked half the hall. The steward, an older man with a name tag that had been polished to a blur, was tucking sheets into a linen bag like he was hiding mats. He saw my card. He made the sign of the cross without moving his hand. He looked past me like the check an agent had. He stuck a folded towel over the corner of the mirror inside the card, covering it as if it were naked. "Some names fall through," he said. His accent rounded the word, so they sounded like something learned a long time ago. "They are hungry when they fall. Do not look at the glass." Then he will discard around me and stop halfway down the hall, as if he remembered the part where he was not supposed to talk. "You think you would leave then? Walk off. Take your bag and wait on the dock." The ship would not let me choose that. The letter was on my bed when I finally got in, this time with a yellow carbon copy beneath it. The room smelled like lemon and static. The mirror was clean and black as the sea at night. I held the letter to the bevel and watched my name try to draw itself again in a faint lace of condensation that did not rise from my side. I tore the letter carefully down the fold. It was a petty thing to do. It felt like choosing myself in a place that had already decided otherwise. The immediate consequence was small. The cabin lights flickered and stayed dim. The air cut off for a single breath. Then it all came back like nothing had happened. I slept for an hour, where I lay very still and let the ship move beneath me and pretended that counted. Emergency drills have a tone like a swallowed screen. At 5.15, the alarm did its 30-second wail, and the ship shivered with footsteps. I joined the column of passengers flowing like a river that knows the route even if you do not. The signs led toward the lifeboat deck again, past the bar where the bark under a pretendant not to see me, and wiped the clean shelf. The sky had gone the color of warm metal. The wind changed directions in the stubborn way when it does when it has decided what it wants. The crew member at Station D scanned my card, and the scanner produced that same red-blue nothing. She glanced at me, then at a clipboard, as if the paper could take responsibility for a person better than her eyes could. "Overflow to 12, she said softly in the heads that buzzed in her hair. "I asked yesterday," I said. "There is number 12. "Then it should be quick," she said, which was not an answer. She pointed down the line again, past the last neat boat, toward the blank bracket. The ship gave a long, long, slow groan, not from the engines, but from the ribs of it, the long bones. There's a point between choosing and being chosen where you still feel the air around your face and remember your name as something you only say in airports. I stepped past the rope. I set my palm on the metal bracket where a boat should hang. The metal was warm, warmer than it should have been beneath evening air. I felt a breath on my wrist from seaman's steel, a soft, damp exhale like a sigh from a sleeping room. The house lights shone bright across the deck. The crew called instructions that felt like numbers recited at a ritual. I listened for my name and heard nothing. I followed the line below to where the glass of the atrium rose to decks up in glossy panes. The bevels caught the sunset, and then until it looked like fire behind water. My reflection found me in each panel, then lost me, then duplicated me with a half-second delay that made me sorry I had looked. Looked in one panel, one of me breathed out and fogged the glass, and the other did not. The fog traced the letters. Not the right order, not the right hand. I pressed my palm to the glass and left no mark. On the other side, a palm flattened against mine, not matching. a half inch to the left, with fingers a little longer than mine, as if whoever was inside the ship had been stretched. The fog on the inside spelled my last name correctly, but the first letter dragged like it had been erased and written again. If you have ever stood on one side of a hospital window and watched someone mouth, "I love you," without the sound, you know the hurt in it. Met someone call, a crisp voice behind me that did not sound like concern so much as protocol. "You need to return to your assigned station." "I am at my assigned station," I said, and my voice came back tiny in the big glass throat of the atrium. The reflection of the crew member behind me did not have a face. Whether a feature should have been, the glass showed a blur, as if the ship would not allow the scene to be too distinct. The letter was back in my cabin after the drill, taped to the mirror. Security did not come. The envelope had the same header. Administrative error. This version said I would be escorted ashore at dawn by a port agent. It offered a voucher that had my name printed in a typeface that might have been Arial if you were feeling generous. The voucher amount would have solved my overdue electric bill and half my rent. The delayed echo of tearing the first letter arrived in the smallest cruelty. At the bottom of the page, beneath a signature line, the ink bled into a water stain in the shape of the hand, like someone had touched it from the wet side. Sleep was a suggestion I ignored. I walk, shop. Night turns a ship into a museum of what it pretends to be by day. The shopping arcade closed its gates. The nightclub breathed a bass thump like a giant heart 3 decks over. Every polished detail reflected something, and every reflection felt a half beat out of time. Twice I turned a corner and met myself turning the other way a second before I arrived, which is a sentence that makes more sense when you say it slow. Near midnight, the wind rose fast, which it can do without the sky warning you properly. The ship tilted just enough to send ice and an empty glass to the floor. People laughed like this was part of the show. The intercom announced a routine test of systems and apologized for any disturbance. Somewhere below, the lifeboats creaked in their cradles, all 11 of them counting quietly. I found the officer again, the one with the tired stare. There, he stood near the crew door where the sign said authorized only in a font that meant it. He looked at me as if he had been trying not to. "You should not be walking," he said. "Midnight is when we turn the ship over." "What does that mean?" I asked. He touched the wall. "We reset the count," he said. "Guests who are not counted at midnight have never been aboard." He did not add unless. He watched me like he wanted to talk himself out of bleeding and magic. "I have been aboard all day," I said. "You have seen me." He shook his head once like he could blur a memory and make it kinder. "We are not supposed to see you," he said. "If we do, we keep walking." "What about life? Book 12? I asked. He flinched at the number, the way a person flinches at a sound their body learned in childhood. He glanced down the corridor where the crew steer will cut through like a throat. 12 is for names that do not stick, he said. It never launches. It never needs to. Do not put yourself there. What happens at midnight? I asked, but the door had already closed his face back to a reflection I could not trust. The clock on the atrium bulkhead ticked toward 12 with ridiculous theater. My phone said 11:58. The ship's time agreed. I stood across from the mirror of my desk and watched the air on the other side mist. The letters came slow, like someone tracing from memory. Then the vertical of an L, then the little hook of an E. It was my name, spelled by someone who wanted me very much for not at all. I said it out loud in the small room like a password, and the fog trembled. I had the letter. I had a pen. It was the ugliest choice I have ever made. Sign and let them escort me ashore and take the credit in life, or refuse and find out of the shipment what it said about counting. My job, my rent, my reputation, my body, my sense of what is true, all of it balanced on a blank line. If you have ever told yourself your life is not a ghost story, then stood in front of a mirror that disagreed, you know the taste in my mouth. I signed. The immediate consequence was relief, so sweet it felt like falling asleep in a warm car. The lights hummed full. The air conditioner sighed awake. The fog on the other side of the glass cleared, as if a window had been opened in a room you cannot enter. It was not the ship forgiving me. It was the ship filing me. Midnight came. The horn blew a soft note to mark the hour, and the deck vibrated like a cat being pleased with itself. When I looked at my phone, the email with my assignment was gone. The thread with my editor ended yesterday. The calendar event for this cruise pointed to a blank square. I had signed into the future, but left my past on the gameway by accident. In the morning, the port agent did not arrive. The letter had promised, but promises that sea are only as good as the tide. Instead, my door was open to a new cabin smell and a woman's suitcase on the bed. The TV screen scrolled a welcome message with her name and cursive bubbles. She hung to herself while she hung dresses with soft clicks. She was real in the uncomplicated way new people are. She looked right past me like the others had learned to do. Sorry, I said, reflexively, because some habits can be polite even when they are terrified. This is my cabin. She smiled. I think you have a run floor, she said, and the mirror but the desk fog just a little where a breath passed, then cleared like a mouth deciding not to speak. I went to guest services to make trouble and found only the model ship and the reflection of a man leaning over it. My reflection. The model's lifeboats were orange almonds. There were 11 on the starboard side. The starboard side reflection counted 12, even though I could not see where the extra one sat. And the reflection, a tiny white number, was painted on a place below the last bracket. 12, as neat as printed type. In my world, the paint was gone, but I could smell rubber and old rope. I could almost hear a slow creak, as if something rested its weight where nothing was. I did not have a cabin anymore. I did not have a reservation in the restaurant company. The bartender, who had seen me, slid a drink to nobody when I sat. He wiped the bar where a glass was not. I walked to the deck where the dancers rehearsed for the sail away party and watched them practice, smiling in temple. Mia filmed a slow pan of the sky and made a caption out love, a line about horizon and hope. When she turned and the camera caught me in the frame, she tapped the screen with a frown and the image refocused until I was gone. It would be noble to say I tried the crew door again, or that I climbed a stair I was not supposed to, or that I tied myself to a railing like a bad luck charm and refused to be edited out. What I did was practical and stupid. I went back to the mirror and asked it to show me a way to remain. The fog rose slow, as if whoever was on the other side had learned my timing. The letters spelled a sentence now, backward. It took me a second to read it. You boarded wrong. My breath made a tiny round cloud that punctuated the end. The handwriting looked like mine would have someone taught it to ride underwater. I remembered the tug, get the gangway, that little catch. I remembered the elevator skipping my floor, the way the mustard card like the number that was not there. I thought of the steward covering the mirror with a towel, like it might see something it should not. The ship did not erase you because you were unimportant. It erased you because you were miscounted. The sea deals an exact change. The misdirection of the administrative letter felt generous now. It had offered me an escape that was also a filing cabinet. I had signed a line that put me into a bin. The bin had a number, 12. The bin never launched because it did not have to. It just waited with its mouth open like a story that welcomed sequels. There was a choice left. I could spend the last day walking like a rumor, then let the ship reset at midnight and take the rest of me. Or I could try to get the count right by stepping through the only place the number still tried to make me real. The glass was cool under my palms. The fog hand met mine a half-inch off. The letters wiped away under my skin. The bevel of the mirror cast a little shadow like an edge. I pressed. The give was almost nothing, a softened pressure. A flex the way the whole flex went away to hit, and the ship absorbed it. The world behind the glass was my cabin, just to the left, just slowed by one heartbeat. The suitcase on the bed was closed now. The new passenger had left. The TV scrolled and welcomed I could not read. The mirror lasted as a mirror until it did not. I put my hand into the cold and it came back wet. Not water exactly, more like the feeling of a breath that does not belong to you, condensed and cleaning. I thought of a list the check-in agent could not find. I thought of a page where my name would never be ink, but could still be found pressed in a paper like a finger to it. I set my shoulder and pushed. Later, I tell myself there must have been a smarter solution. That if I had held out until dawn, the port agent would have led me down a gameway into an ordinary day where my phone buzzed with emails and the bargain to remember my order, and the ship was only a ship. It is a kind lie I rehearse when the cabin goes quiet and the glass starts to bloom with messages in a hand that is mine and not mine. When I stepped, the cold took the warmth from my face first, then re-gifted it as a pressure like deep water. I went through the border of my own breath. The room behind the mirror smelled like lemon and old fog. The cabin door was open to a corridor where nobody moved. The TV scroll paused on my name and then continued as if relieved. The mirror I had come through was black as a night window above water. On my side, someone else stood. A shape exactly my height read out in trace letters that looked like thank you and something else that might have been sorry. The immediate consequence was a brightness in my head like standing up too fast. The code on my key, card glowed and then dimmed. My phone vibrated with push alerts that meant nothing to me anymore. The delayed echo waited until later, general and cruel. An email from my editor arrived with the subject line that was a joke only we used. I opened it and read the first line, and then the rest of the message blurred into a white page that never loaded, like a view that will not resolve no matter how far you lean over the rail. The ship docked at the first port. I stood near the gameway and watched the serialized happiness of disembarkation. The sun had put on its best light. The band played a tune that made even the tired crew lift their knees. The new passenger from my cabin rolled her suitcase past and checked her pocket for her passport without looking up. The officer with the tired stare paused at the top of the ramp and looked directly at me. His gaze slid slightly left and focused on the space I occupied on the other side of the glass. "Remember to return to your assigned station," he said softly, not to me. Me. He blinked the slow apology and then walked on. He had done his job. He had kept walking. They say you can feel when a ship is lighter, when it drops a weight you did not know it carried. When the gameway hauled in, the ship sighed and turned back to the open. The lifeboats hungry very still for a moment, all 11 in a line like teeth. Out of habit, I counted again. The reflection in the atrium glass counted 12. If you were standing the right distance and breathes at the right moment, you could see the outline of something hanging from an empty bracket, a boat that is not there unless you needed to never arrive. A week later, a new guest took my re-signed cabin. I saw her in the mirror, practicing a smile for her first night. She touched the glass to smooth the hair, and the cold met her fingers with a damp kiss. The fog rose and traced a circle where she had pressed her hand. A face pushed against from the inside for a second, pale, relieved, learning how to breathe. It looked like mine, and then it did not. If you sail on this shit, do not test the glass. Do not ask for 12. If your car comes blank, do not accept it. And if the mirror writes your name before you do, be kind with your breath. Someone on the other side is counting. Sorry to cabin 733, second door. The second door in cabin 733 was not in the photos. And I would have known this because I looked at those pictures like a map before I booked, tracing where the bed sat and how the chair angled toward the porthole, imagining the new life measured in days at sea, and breakfast side did not cook. The corridor smelled like cold perfume and iron linens. The air in the cabin carried a thin edge of winter. Later, that door stood beside the wardrobes if the wall had grown a seam overnight, chrome knob polished, keyhole black as an eye that had not blinked yet. I had promised myself I would be fine alone. After the breakup, after the part where we divided pots by who burned eggs less often, friends said a cruise would be easy. No decisions, no cooking, music under a sky that forgot your name. I kept hearing the last fight anyway. "Way, you will make everything about you," he had said, and I said, "No, I will make this about being alive." I sat my suitcase on the bed and watched the new door like it might exhale. The cold was deep as near the scene, a careful refrigeration that felt deliberate. The cabin looked normal apart from the door. One queen bed under white that clothed blue in lamplight. A desk where the laminated safety card asked me to read it fully. A porthole with a sew film of salt. The regular door to the hallway wore the cabin number on a plaque, brass and precise. 733. The new door had no number. I crouched and pressed 2 fingers to the jamb. It felt like metal through paint. Not drywall. Not wood. Something that remembered ship bones. On the carpet, the pothole leaned toward it as if the fibers had learned which way they were pulled. At first, I told myself that was a connecting door. Plenty of cabins have them. Families. Friends. I turned toward the phone to call the desk and ask if it could be locked, then paused. Something on the little housekeeping card by the television had been circled twice in black pen. 7:33. A neat oval, then a second oval on top, darker. The rest of the checklist was tidy. Towels. Self. Minibar sealed. 7:33 had been marked like a thought someone could not quite. I slid the card into a drawer and told myself I was nosy, not scared. And I came fast over the water. You feel on a ship when the horizon becomes a line you can smell. I went to dinner, owner, sat alone at the bar, made friends with the soda. I said to polite things to the bartender so he did not worry about me. And then threw you two honest things because the bass from the lounge felt like a second spun. At 11, I stepped back into the corridor where the carpet swallowed footsteps, and I let myself believe I had been brave and ordinary. Then I put my ear to the second door for fun. You do that when you think you own a fear. I heard footsteps on the other side. So careful, pacing. You know the sound of your own feet in an empty room. This was mine, down to the rhythm I fall into when I'm thinking. I held my breath and timed the pattern. 8 steps to the wall. I paused like a held thought. 8 steps back. It sank with my pulse until I could not tell which one moved first. I drew back and laughed once, the kind of laugh that sounds like air escaping a paper bag. It was a joke. It was someone in a connecting room. It was me from earlier, like a voice memo you forgot to delete. The handle turned at 1:33 in the morning. I know the time because the bedside clock does the blighting of glowing up blue that never lets you fully sleep. The knob twitched in tiny testing motions, as if whoever was on the other side was learning the shape of my hand. The cold drifted from the seam and settled in my teeth. I sat up and said hello, because naming something makes it less hungry. The handle stopped. Silence filled the ship and forced quiet that felt designed for secrets. I texted a friend on land, a half-joke about a bonus door. The message failed to send twice and then sat politely unsent. In the morning, the steward had replaced my towels and folded the edge of the duvet under like a promise. The housekeeping checklist was back on the desk. 7:33 was circled again, a third loop grinding ink into paper. I stepped into the corridor and knocked on the next door over and waited for a neighbor to say something grounding. A man opened, sleepy and sunburned at the hairline, and told me he was in 731. His wall backed onto a service shaft, not another cabin. He held up his cabin plan on his phone, proud. No shared wall. Nothing to hear, he said. He wished me a nice day, like a period at the end of an argument. Yes, services smiled the way hotels teach you to smile when you must say no. The woman at the desk checked a screen that reflected in her glasses. 7:33, she read and paused. You're on the starboard side. Midget. No connecting doors. Some cabins have a storage panel for maintenance. It is sealed. There is nothing to open. She printed a small map and drew a line to the spa. As if a massage would convince me I slept well. When I asked if I could be moved, she apologized and said the sailing was full. She slid a brochure about excursions over the desk like a warm compress. That afternoon, the air by the second door measured a different cold. I do not own a thermometer. I have a face. The breath that came out when I laughed at myself turned visible in a thin string that broke and was gone. I opened the hotel Bible in the drawer, because ritual comforts even if it does not satisfy. Between Corinthians and a cruise coupon, a folded paper waited. Cruise safety audited, 733 circled twice. Notes unreadable under a line of black marker. Beneath the marker, a bleed of letters anyway. Retrofitted, do not open in transit. I traced the thick scribble with my nail and left a white scratch that looked like a horizon in bad weather. At 1:33, the handle turned again. It held the soft, stubborn pressure like a hand thinking. I had not slept, not really. I lay with a lamp on him, watched the seam. I calculated hours left of the night, like coins. If you have ever waited out a decision and called it caution, you know that math. I told myself I was awake enough to win. The knob eased left as if to show me landing positions. I stood and crossed to it and put my palm against the metal. It was colder than the deck rail at sunrise. The footsteps began on the other side. 8 away. Us. 8 back. The carpet registered mine before I moved. Morning made the world soft again. That is why people drink coffee. I knocked on 735. The woman who answered had a travel hat that said she was committed to being delighted. She said she had not heard anything. She said her wall vibrated once at 2 a.m. like a ship turning, but it might have been a dream. She made a face when I told her about the extra door. The cabins in this row only have one, she said, and pointed for emphasis. She closed her door with the general authority of a person whose vacation would be perfect even if the sea split in half in front of her. I knew I had convinced myself to open the door a crack in daylight and get it over with, as her prize is always bigger at night. I set a chair under the main door to the corridor like a child, as if the danger was in. I wrapped the complimentary robe around my arm and used it like a pot holder. The knob did not resist. The door eased and were achingly slow, silent except for soft sound like paper lifting from glue. 1 inch, 2 inches. The seam breathed the long, cool breath into my face, and my eyes watered purely from temperature. I saw a hallway that should not exist. It ran straight and narrow and gracelessly lit, bare metal ribs and a floor painted with safety grit. No carpet, no art, no signs. The air smelled like chill coin. On the opposite wall, every few feet were doors. Each wore a brass number plate, 733, the nearest one, and gleamed freshly polished. Farther down, the numbers doled with salt. They all said the same, precise as a stamp. I stood with my hand on the edge of something that made the rest of the ship feel like a set. My breath fogged and hung in the opening like a curtain that could remember words. I shut the door. I did it with that careful politeness you used when you leave a sleeping baby. The latch clicked with a tiny sound that rang bigger than it was. Us. Then I put my back to the wood and sat on the floor and laughed and cried in the same breath, because the two often travel together when you realize you're not equipped to explain your own life. The footsteps started again on the far side. 8 away. House 8 back. They were patient. They were mine, low like a song. I put my fingertips to the seam and felt a real draft. Behind me, the steward's checklist lay on the desk with a fourth circle around 733 digging ink to the table. Someone at the bar told me there used to be a deck that ran boat to stern for service crews. It had been sealed when they renovated. Ghost stories live in renovations. He said the deck would have been on my level. He said doors get painted over and still work in storms. He grinned and ordered a second beer to make it a campfire. Another guest said the number 7 is lucky. 3 means balance. 3 again means repetition. She said 733 is a pale and groan for the nervous system. She said that last part like a fact. I went back to the cabin with a warm bravery of other people's theories filling my pockets like stones. Guest services doubled down on calm. The manager walked me back and listened at the second door with his head tilted, then smiled as if I had been caught telling a good lie. He said it was a storage panel for linens. He said there were no corridors behind guest cabins. He said the chill was the vent, and the footsteps were in my head because shits have many knees and they all bend. He smelled like eucalyptus and a contract. When the door handle rattled behind him, he did not blink. The red herring was confident enough to be believable until he left and whispered version of my name came through the seam. The Wi-Fi died around midnight and stayed dead in my cabin while the phone worked fine by the elevators. My key card refused to reset. The app insisted my room did not exist. I asked the steward for a second blanket, and he said all blankets for 733 are double issued. He said this to the air next to me without making eye contact. He slid 2 folded ones into my hands and touched the second door frame with the side of his palm like a doctor. He whispered a prayer that was mostly breath. Then he left the housekeeping card on my desk with 733 circle twice more in a trembling hand that had run out of ink. At 133, the handle turned into rhythm that matched me. I counted. The knob twitched the way mine would if I were testing it from the other side. I said my name through the scene. The voice on the far side said it back with the exact wrong emphasis, as if someone who knew he had learned me from captions. The ticking element became a promise. Each night the door would ask. Each night I would answer. Each pause would be longer than the last, until my fear and my curiosity crossed like lines on a chart. When I slept, I dreamed of double numbers written on the inside of my eyelids. The point of no return was quiet. I opened the door fully at 2:00 in the morning because the clock mattered more than courage. I stepped into the cold. My foot found metal that did not move like ship metal. The air tasted like old ice and pennies. Behind me, the door eased itself closed with the Cooper's patience. I did not turn to stop it. If you have ever made a choice that will define you and felt the room agree, you know this rest. I had the holy stretch to a vanishing point that held no vanishing. The lights hung to frequency that tickled my teeth. I tried the first door on the right, 733. Inside a cabin waited, mine but tired as if used up by a different day. The bed was made in a pattern my body knew. The housekeeping cards had on the desk. 733 was circled twice. On the bed, a suitcase lay open to a shirt I had not packed. I closed the door softly. I opened the one across. 733. This cabin's mirror had a crack like a thin frost line. On the bathroom counter of toothbrush stood bristles up like a tiny flag. I backed out. The footsteps began. 8 away. Pause. 8 back. Only now the echo continued after I stopped. It did not wait for me. I kept moving and the corridor did not end. Each door read 733. Some cabins were brighter. Somehow the cold, like a memory. In one, the robe I had draped over the chair was instead folded on the bed. In another, my phone sat on the desk with a message from the ex that never arrived in my world. He had written a single okay that meant everything and nothing. I stared until the screen dimmed itself away. I was close when someone does not want to be seen. I returned the phone to the exact angle I had found it, afraid of damaging an order I could not parse. When I realized the footsteps were in front of me and behind me at once, I stopped. The metal floor caught the sound and kept it. The air carried it like a rumor. If the hallway carries you, it teaches you how to walk like it does. My steps became a metronome I could not override. The cold pressed through my shoes and made my toes ache in a slow, old way. I thought of the steward tapping the frame. I thought of the map with no connecting doors. I thought of my ex saying, "I make everything about me." And I thought, yes, but this is me as a hallway that will not end. I picked a door that had a scuff that chin height and decided it was mine because I remember kicking it yesterday. Inside, the bed was made. The air was soft. The normal door to the corridor stood where it should. The second door behind me, east shut with a sound like a silt deciding. My luggage lay on the rack, open to the same shirt I had worn aboard. I told myself this meant the hallway only wanted me to know it was there. I told myself everything you were telling me right now in your head. I crawled under the duvet and watched the clock crawl toward 133 like a child waiting to be told the truth. The handle turned on the second door. The footsteps began. 8 away. OSS. 8 back. I lay very still and pretended to be a person for whom this was not a deal. The knob dipped and rose and dipped again in a patient instruction. It wanted me to walk in step with it. It wanted fear that feels like humiliation. The thought that I was learning to be a door that opens for itself disgusted me so much I laughed, then cried, then laughed harder until my throat hurt. The cold reached into the bed and took my knees. Morning found the note slipped under my normal door, the corridor side. It was typed. For management, we have moved you to cabin 829 due to plane maintenance. Police at Porter for assistance. This seemed like mercy. It sounded like rationality. I packed quickly. I did not look at the second door when I left. The steward saw me in the hallway and kept his gaze on the floor. He had a fresh housekeeping card. 733 was circled twice in a hand that shook. He slipped the card into his apron like a talisman in reverse, as if hiding the circle might break it. Cabin 829 smelled like lumen and new carpet. No second door. No draft. I stood in the center and spun once to check every wall like a dancer. I laughed at nothing and then at everything. I wrote a note to whomever might take 733 after me. I kept it short. Do not open the second door. I was ashamed of how childish it sounded. So I added please, as if politeness could protect a stranger. I left the note on the desk of 733 before I departed, waited with the safety brochure. The door to the hall closed with a click that sounded like a period. That night, at 133, a knock came through the wall behind my bed in 829. The knock was muffled and careful, almost apologetic. Free taps. OSS. Free taps again. Then a single tap like a dot. 733. I sat up and put my palm to the pane. The cold found me through a slab of ship. From the corridor came the scourge of a cart, the tired sigh of a vacuum, the natural night movements of a place that never sleeps. Beneath all that, the rhythm continued. 8 away, pause, 8 back. I whispered that I heard it. The knock paused like a person listening, then returned, faint and constant. In the morning, I passed 733 on purpose. The door stood open while housekeeping worked. The bed was stripped to white bones. On the desk, my note lay folded in half. Someone had written on it in pencil. Too late. The loops of the T's were double drawn, like the hand could not settle. On the housekeeping card, 733 had 2 circles dug into the paper so deep they scarred the next sheet. The steward lifted the card slowly and looked at me with the expression of a man who has watched the same way many times and knows it anyway. He tucked the card away and covered the second door's knob with a glove. On the last night, the cold found me through the walls, even in a cabin that had nothing extra. I sat up and counted with a knock. 3, 3, 3. Then the soft drag of footsteps learning how to match mine. I thought of the sealed deck story. I thought of how fast the manager said storage. I thought of my own decision at 2.00. Immediate consequence, I was here and breathing. Delayed echo. The sound behind my wall followed me like a shadow that had reprinted itself. I said out loud that I would not open any more doors, as if an elf meant something against a machine. When we docked, I rolled my suitcase past 733 one last time. A couple stood inside, laughing over the folded towel shaped like a swan. The woman found my note on the desk and read it, then smiled at the drama of strangers. She tucked it into her book as a souvenir. The steward moved like a quiet planet around them, touching nothing that would change their orbit. He glanced at me, and then at the second door, and then at the wall between us, as if measuring the depth he could not cross. The air around the scene grew a tiny fog that cleared as soon as the couple leaned closer. I left the ship and watched it shrink to a toy against the sky. In my bag, my phone stamped photos with time that proved nothing. On quiet nights now, the knot comes through apartment drywall with ocean patience. 3, 3, 3. My heat is perfect, and still I see my breath when I stand very close to the closet where the drywall gently bows. If you ever stay in 733, bring a scarf. Bring a note for the next person. And if you stand with your urge of the second door and hear footsteps that match yours before you move, do not be flattered. It is not you. Not yet. Story 3. While sung on the intercom, the first time the intercom sang, it was not a voice. It was a low, rising note that moved through the vents like a tide, pressing the walls until the metal seemed to breathe. The sound found my ribs and leaned on them. It was too clean to be a mistake, too mournful to be intentional, and it carried the cold smell of ocean into every corridor. I sat up in my cabin with my recorder already in my hand, because this is what I do. I chase sounds, I catch them, and I feed them to songs as if the right harmony might turn them into truth. I told myself it was a foghorn filter by Steele. I told myself I could sleep after I captured 30 seconds. The red light blinked on my recorder like a patient eye. The intercom hunt, and beneath the long tone something moved. It was not a whale, not exactly, but the vowels of it felt older than the ship. My heartbeat put a warm thumb on the track. When the sound rose, my pulse rose with it, like we had agreed to synchronize without knowing it. I breathed out and watched a pale cloud drift in the cabin air the way breath does when winter sneaks under a door. For context, I booked the cruise to get unstuck. Reviews called it restorative. My manager called it content. I had an EP to finish and no winter left in the city to hide in. So I brought a recorder and an Opic and the kind of hunger you develop when you have not slept right for months. If you have ever walked onto a ship and felt smaller in a good way, you know the hope I had that first day. The ocean writes you a little. I wanted a new version, a cleaner take. I did not plan to hear a song that planned to hear me back. The intercom clicked twice like a microphone waking up. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain will now address. The sentence spoke in half and fell into a tone that was not even pretending to be human. It rolled through the ceiling and pressed on the air in my mouth. I hit record as if collecting it would make me its author. My thumb trembled. The pace in my neck matched the swell of the sound perfectly, like two metronomes that find each other in a quiet room. If that has ever happened to you, you know how wrong it feels to be in sync with something you cannot see. I took the recorder to the atrium to hear how the song lived in glass. The chandeliers trembled in sympathy, tiny halos rippling with each note. The crowd kept talking through it the way people do on ships, where everything is curated to be fine. Aker, remember, in a navy blazer, noticed me raising the recorder toward the ceiling and moved quickly. He reached for the device, and for a second we played a small, polite tug-of-war. He smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes and pulled my headphone jack out with 2 fingers. Audio of disturbance is sometimes piggyback on the PA. He said, "We are handling it. Please refrain from recording." He pushed the cable into my palm and walked away, already speaking into his radio as if he were continuing a different conversation. The red light on my recorder kept blinking, which should have been impossible with the jack out. When I played back the last 30 seconds through the tiny onboard speaker, I did not hear the same note. I heard voices. They were layered under the tone. Dozens of voices speaking at quants without words that belonged to me. You know when you hear a recording of your own voice and want to crawl out of your skin? This felt like that, but the voice was not mine yet. I turned the volume down until it was a whisper you hear more with your teeth than your ear. The voices did not agree on a language, but they agreed on a rhythm. My heart adjusted to match it, as if control of the tempo had moved out of me. The captain made a crisp announcement at dinner about calm seas and the sunrise that would not disappoint. Somewhere between his syllables, something made a small vowel, like a person exhaling underwater. Nobody else reacted. The elderly couple at table 4 kept talking about the truffle fries. A girl at the next table scrolled through photos of herself framed by perfect blue. I felt like a radio that had caught a station by accident and could not encode it. I raised the recorder under the tablecloth and watched the red light pulse against the white the way a heartbeat shows through skin. When the captain said good night and the PA clicked off, the red light stayed on. In the audio file, there was a sound like a long hallway breathing. That is how it started. Small notes at wrong times. The practical explanation came quickly from a friendly officer at guest services. "Testing," he said. "Selmar," he added, because the word makes people nod. A gentle sound program we sometimes pipe in at low volume to calm sensitive passengers. He finished, as if the ship had a meditation playlist. I nodded and asked if the cabin number in the announcement was a joke I did not get. He looked just past my shoulder to avoid aiming the truth at me. The announcement earlier had said, "Please report to cabin 4147 for a guest service matter." Our ship has 4 decks below the public decks. None of them have a cabin 4147. The number stuck in my ear like a tag left on a shirt. I checked the deck plans posted by the elevators. Number 4000 series. No deck with a 41XX row. I felt stupid for feeling singled out by a number. I felt seen by a system I did not understand. That night the tone came through the intercom at 3:03 a.m., and the clock's symmetry made the room feel arranged around me. I recorded again. When I listened back, the tone had shaped I could not hear in the air. It rose and fell in a pattern that matched a way from I knew very well. It was the shape of my heart on a hospital monitor from a video I sampled 2 years ago. I try to laugh this off to myself. You will say that's confirmation bias. You will say a lot of sine waves look similar. You will say sleep deprivation harmonizes with paranoia. I try to say it too. Then the intercom delivered a message to a cabin number that the plan insisted did not exist, and the red light on my recorder pulsed exactly when my chest did. If you have ever looked for meaning in noise and felt it look for you back, you know how fast you run in circles before you decide to step in one. On day 2, the PA sang during the bingo jackpot. The host, a man whose hair defied when, froze mid-joke and blinked like he lost the end of a sentence. The speakers hummed at Bruised Blue Note. A woman laughed and said, "Wow," wails, which made half the room nod in relief. The sound pressed into the carpet until it looked damp around the edges. I raised the recorder. The same crew member from the atrium appeared at my elbow and put 2 fingers on the cable again. This time he did not smile. "Please stop," he said. "If you capture it, it uses you." He flinched like he had stepped on something sharp. I did not say that. He added, and his mouth snapped as if a hand inside his jaw had guided it. He let go and left, and the intercom has to final slow exhale and cut out. In the hush, you could hear the ceiling tick as it settled. My recording showed a spike like a gasp, then silence that did not feel empty. I started hunting the sound. I walked the service deck near the kitchen where the air tasted like onions and steam, and the tone found me in the vents. I pressed my palm to a steel wall and felt a vibration that did not match the engine's truth. It came in a cadence that knew how long my breath was. In a sterile Mark crew, only the metal handrail busts softly, like a throat clearing behind a locked door. I tried the door and stepped back as if it had breathed on me. The rest of the ship moved on. I kept a new time. I failed in my cabin whenever the intercom hummed. You will think this is normal ship chaos. It felt pointed. My recorder, which has never done anything but start and stop, developed a behavior. It would not light up for anything except the song. If I tried to record normal room tone, the light stayed dead. When the PA tone rose, even if I had not touched the buttons, I blinked awake. It captured exactly as long as the sound lasted, no more. It was like a trap that only closes on the animal at once. Months. I interviewed a sound tech in the theater, a woman who wore her hair up in a no-nonsense knot. She said there was a rumor about a deck built for deliveries that was close when the ship changed owners. She said the intercom lines were old and crossed with ghosts. She said this with a straight face and then added, "Officially, we are testing an ambient program for relaxation." She watched me watch the ceiling as if I might catch it lying. When the PA clicked and a breath of tone snuck in, she stared at my recorder with such raw dread that I put it in my pocket like a weapon I was ashamed of. That night, the number came back. "Please report to cab in 4147. The captain did not say it. The tone did, as if sound could carry digits. My skin tightened. The deck plans kept refusing to produce the ghost. I felt a choice knitting itself quietly. If I followed the song, I would admit that it knew me. If I stayed put in clap for the magic shield like everyone else, I would sleep some other night. I told myself I would just find the stairwell and look. Curiosity is one way to name hunger. 2:55 a.m. I was in socks and a hoodie and an old Bravery. At the door to the crew stairwell log, open 1 inch, which a sign told me was impossible. I slipped inside with the shamelessness of someone who has decided to be punished later. The air on the stairs had the refrigerated smell of ice that has been wet too long. The metal tread sang a tiny bring under my feet that made me think of glass rinse. The door closed behind me with a commitment I did not appreciate. The handle did not respond when I tried it. The intercom hummed as if pleased. The steps down were so narrow, I had to turn my shoulders, and I could feel the ship breathe around me. My recorder lit itself in my pocket, like something waking up hungry. I did not press it. I could hear the tone in my elbow joints and my teeth in the soft space behind my eyes where songs usually begin. If the ship has lungs, this is what they sound like when they fill. At the lowest landing, the door had no handle, just a rectangle of older metal and paint that had been repainted and scuffed and repainted again. It opened anyway. The lowest deck was not a room so much as a circle of sound. Speakers hung in a ring like black mouth, open toward a center point I could not make myself step into. The light was a patient gray. The walls were the names of ports under old paint. like history had been sanded to a hymn. The intercom tom warbled and resolved and broke into harmonics the way a voice breaks when it chooses to plead. The recorder sprang from my pocket, or my hand let it go. It hung in the air a second before the cord caught and made it swing a little pendulum. The voices came back later. I heard a child counting in a language I learned once and forgot. I heard a man humming a hymn I used to fake in my grandmother's church when I wanted her to be seen, smiling. I heard the vowel shape of my own name without syllables, just the way it feels when you say it without sound. Beneath, the long tone held steady. It was not a wail. It was the ship echoing whatever we had fed it. Every announcement, every cry, every laugh through the PA had found the shape here, and the shape was hungry for new notes. You will ask what I did. I did not run. The door had closed behind me and pretended never to have been a door. I did not scream because my breath had synchronized and screaming felt like a tech problem, not an act of will. I walked to the circle. I put one foot in, then the other, and the speakers gently lifted a feedback that found the frequency of my heartbeat and tuned to it. There's a small sweet spot in sound where it phases with your pulse and creates the illusion of weightlessness. It is pleasant until it does not. The tone held me there in a cradle I did not ask for. In the recorder, my last clean track starts with me breathing like someone learning again. The red light blinks in time with the tone. The layered voice is resolved into a single note that tastes like salt. The ship learns your tune, and then it keeps it. The twist of it came with the understanding that none of this was about the ocean at all. The sea is a medium. The ship was the instrument, a big metal mouth that had collected voices for years and was ready to sing them back as one. My heartbeat folded into the chord, and something adjusted like a mixing board finding a better balance. I put my hand on the grill of the speaker. It vibrated like a throat that was done with secrets. If I had pulled my hand away, maybe the note would have given me back. If I had smashed the recorder, maybe the PA would have rolled away like fog. If you have ever been touched by a song that feels like it remembers you, you know how impossible leading can be. I leaned in. The speaker warmed my palm. The echo of my name swelled, and this time the syllables were correct. Later, someone in a cabin above me swore they heard a human voice under the wails on the PA. A small melody, nothing fancy, the way you hum when a tune finds you and you're not in the mood to be found. Security did a sweep of the lower decks and logged no irregularities. The crew member who first pulled my cable now avoids the atrium at night. The theater sound tech refuses to explain the equipment tests. She keeps her hair down now, like she wants to hear the difference when it moves in air. On day 4, my cabin was reassigned. A new passenger admired the ocean from my window and filmed the sunsets with a filter that turned them into peaches. My recorder sits on the desk in that cabin, blinking. The light is patient. The porter said lost and found has a backlog, and they will get to it when the ship docks. At 3:03 a.m., the intercom or the thing behind it breathes, and the red I wakes like a small planet. The new passenger rolls over and dreams of choir practice in a school they never attended. In the morning, they hum something that feels original and do not realize they are answering back. The smell of cold salt lingers outside the door longer than it should. The housekeeping card has no notes. The air tastes like breath held between takes. I like to believe there's a place on any ship where the sounds go to settle. Not a ghost deck, not a ritual, a physics. Metal remembers. Numbers. Air hold shape a second longer if you ask it. Maybe that is all this was, and I stood too long where memory lives. Maybe the cabin number was a test to see who would hear. Maybe the voices were always there and mine did not matter. It is a kind thought. It does not account for the way the intercom pauses at dinner now, just before the captain tells a joke, as if waiting to hear if my heart is ready. If you sail and you hear wails those where there should be instructions, do not record, do not hum along. If a cabin number scrolls through the air that your map cannot locate, it is not for you. And if your own pulse leans toward the note until you cannot feel which one the other falls, change floors. Go outside. Let Wayne detune you. The ship has a beautiful voice. That is the problem. It sings what it has learned, and it wants to learn you. So are E4. Lifeboat 12 never launched. I knew something was wrong with the drill long before the horn, because one lifeboat wore its canvas like a shroud and the wind had learned to move around it. The others hung clean and ready, white bell-list flashing numbers that looked like promises. But the one at the far end stayed swaddled and still, ropes quite, canvas creaking in a way that sounded too much like breath. Death, rubber, and salt, and that faint hot smell of engine oil sat under the air. When a mustard alarm finally shrieked, even the gulls went silent for a bee, as if listening for a name that would not be called. My sister Nadia squeezed my hand like we were teenagers sneaking out again. We had booked this to try being us without the years that got in the way, to trade old apologies for breakfast, buffets, and sun. We had not hugged like that in a long time. On the card laners the staff handed us, our station letters matched, and I had a sudden childish thrill that we would be on the same boat should anything go wrong. You tell yourself this means fate is considerate. You hope it is. Our scan took longer. The crew member's scanner blinked red, then a tired blue, then nothing. She kept smiling while the headset and her hair crackled softly. Overflow to 12, she said, tapping our cards with a scanner like a gavel. She pointed toward the far end where canvas lay tied a skin on ice. I looked for the number painted on the hull and saw only Great Tarp, not a nudge me and grand. A mucky 12, she said lightly. At least we are unlucky together. The wind pressed the canvas inward and then let it rise, as if testing how much air it held. I asked the woman with the headset if 12 was under maintenance, and she looked past me rather than through me. All equipment is fully operational, she said. It sounded like something memorized. When another passenger asked the same question with less politeness, the crew member simply read the safety script faster, as if more words could cover the tarp too. We stood in two neat lines, and the muster leader held a clipboard without turning the page. And when she reached our names, she did not say them. Him. She drew a long line down her sheet that looked like a horizon and went on. The scanner turned to the tiny receipt for me that said Station 12 in red block letters. It felt like the kind of paper you'd get for a suitcase that had to be taken to a separate belt. I tucked it into my pocket and told myself redundancy keeps people alive. Across the deck, a kid counted the boats out loud and got to 11 and stopped. He frowned and started over. His father had made a joke about counting stars. The kid shook his head and told him that there were supposed to be 12. I did not like that, his voice carried. Dinner tried to reset us. The ship was all warm light and piano and the smell of butter, but on the way, and I passed two older passengers by the railing. One said, "Not again," and the other touched her wrist like a date. They felt quiet when they saw me, the way people do when they realize the thing they were talking about might have ears. Later, I heard them again near the dessert buffet. Voices lowered over flutes of something pale. That was before they changed the paint, the man said. "You do not paint luck," the woman said. "You bury it." We asked our waiter how often drills assign overflow. He said rarely and smiled wider, which is never the answer you want. Nadia teased me for turning a rehearsal into a story. "This is why you never stop writing," she said, and her laugh made it feel like a habit that got us killed once, but not tonight. I asked about the covered boat anyway. A woman at the next table said we had nothing to worry about because the odds of an emergency were vanishingly small, and because the number 12 is lucky in her family. Her bracelets clinked like little bells. I wanted her certainty like a blanket. The alarm sounded again at midnight, a different tone and chord and clipped. Not a drill, a message. We stumbled into shoes and out along the deck with the others, breath making small ghosts in the cool air. The shit lights had a theater to them now, pools and shadows. Station numbers glowed. 12 still wore its canvas like a secret. As we approached, the tarp made a sound I had never heard canvas make, a long creak from the inside, as if something shifted its weight. The ropes trembled from the movement and went still. Not even laughed, because sometimes that is how you test fear. Security weighed us back to cabins a few minutes later. A medical issue. Nothing for guests. It should have been nothing. Not just said she was going to grab bottled water and meet me in the room. She never arrived. The hallway stayed bright. Her text said on my way and then stopped. The typing dots like a heartbeat that forgot. I waited enough minutes to turn them into hours, then walked every path I could think of back toward the station with the number I was trying not to say out loud. I guessed services. They checked the manifest and told me I was traveling alone. The agent smiled and did not falter, which was worse than if she had frowned. Perhaps your sibling could be registered under a different reservation, she said. Sometimes families meet up midway. I said our cabin number 3 times like a spell. She told me it showed one guest to sign, which is a sentence that can erase a person if you let it. She offered to send security to check the public decks. My phone lost the ship Wi-Fi without drama. I paced the carpet until the patterns felt like maps I was failing to read. By the rail near the covered boat, I found Nadia's gray hoodie folded on a coil of rope. The hood held the shape of her hand in the way cloth remembers. It was dry, which told me the ocean had not reached for it. I tried to imagine her draping it there, because she got warm and then forgetting it, and the picture would not hold. The canvas gave another quiet move moored, a pause, then a slow return. I told myself one makes tricks. I told myself that sentence 3 times, and the air did not believe me. The steward. For our haul, we had the careful kindness of a man who sees too much and is told not to. He brought extra towels and let me talk too long. When I showed him our muster cards, he blanked at the red stamp on mine, and then at Nadia's, the copy she had left on the desk with her room key. 12. Someone had circled the number and blue pen on the back, twice like a habit. The steward smoothed the card with his palm, as if it could iron the circle away. Day. He said nothing I could use. He looked at the ceiling while he did it. I tried to rest, but the deck outside kept whispering canvas noises that did not stop when the wind did. When I went back out, the covered Lifeboat felt warmer, as if the ship excelled through it. I placed my hand on the tarp, and the rubber met me like a held breath. The fabric gave the smallest amount, as if something inside leaned back. I told Nadia out loud to stop the way you talk to someone you cannot see in a crowded store and watch the canvas remain a color that was not an answer. Somewhere else on the ship, a live broke too high, then disappeared. A retired engineer at the bar talked too much when I asked about lifeboats. He said they used to launch them for drills, but you do not do that anymore because you do not tempt fate or legation. He said there was a story about a boat lowered half full once that never touched the water. He said it hung, and then the line jerked empty, like a fishing story that chooses the fisherman. He said the number did not matter. He said numbers matter when you let them. He drank the rest of his beer like a period and stared at nothing. A crewwoman with salt, stiff hair emitted something by saying she did not know anything. She said 12 used to be on the plans, and now it was not, and she had not changed the plans. She said if I saw someone ride over a number, I should not look. She said if I heard my name near it, I should walk away the way people walk from bees. When I asked if anyone had been assigned to 12 at night, she flinched as if the deck itself had answered. The ship rolled left gently and right, and we rocked with it like people learn to dance. The next afternoon, a squall line etched itself on the horizon like handwriting. Announcements began to talk about swells and the careful tone of adults explaining weather to children. I stayed on deck. I'm willing to be far from canvas. The tarp wore faint scuffs I had not seen, scratches in the rubber skin that looked made from the inside. I leaned in until my breath fogged the dull gray, and I could make the letters. The name had been drawn with something blunt, dug through the inner side. It took a second to read. Nadia, backward, as if written to be legible from out here. That night I chose. I could have stayed indoors with the rest, with moves and bingo and the warm, cotton-lived distraction. I could have let the crew tell me the police at the next port would handle it. I leaned in until my breath fogged the dull gray, and I could make the letters. The name had been drawn with something blunt, dug through the inner side. It took a second to read. Nadia, backward, as if written to be legible from out here. That night I chose. I could have stayed indoors with the rest, with moves and bingo in the warm, cotton-lived distraction. I could have let the crew tell me the police at the next port would handle it. That may be my sister to disembark quietly. None of those sentences explain a name written from inside a boat that never sails. This guy made that Hithram that means the storm is answering a promise you forgot you made. I took a rain jacket, a flashlight, a belt to use as a strap, and I sat by 12 and counting in seconds between lightning and thunder like a clock some other hand held. Rain opened like a curtain. The ship leaned into it, and I felt the muscles of the metal. Crew ran in practice lines to check ties and chocks. Boats 3 and 4 swung out and settled against their lines, ready like good animals. 12 shivered under its cover as if it had remembered movement too late. The ropes moaned and then went quiet. The tarp drew in sharply, held for a count of 3, then ballooned outward without wind. The word that jumped into my head was breathing. The flashlight being made the canvas of pale lawn, and my name bubbled under the skin, faint as a word mouthed through glass. I pulled at the me that I could not be there, and I shouted that my sister was in the boat, which is not a sentence you practice. He reached me, then stopped, eyes on the canvas, the way people stop at chapel door, even when they claim no faith. He made a small sign on his chest I could not place, and took a step back as if gravity had reversed. Lightning through the shape of the ropes on the rail like black ladders, and then let the glow go. Under the tarp, there was not the gleam of a hull. There was dark, so complete the beam went nowhere. The light did not return like light does. The rain found the opening and did not appear again. The air from inside was cold and old, a cellar assault in time. I said Nadia into it the way you call into a closet for a child who hides too well. The reply was my name, pulled long, so bowls pulled thin, like something spoken through fabric. Work. I wrapped the belt around the stanchion and my wrist, because even people who loved us used to say we were foolish and brave in equal measure. The immediate consequence of leaning in was stupid comfort. The dark felt like the underside of a blanket on a day you do not want to go to school. That is how it gets you. Then my arm lost its heat, and I felt the pull. Not strong, not violent, but steady as if the ocean had set a small hand at my elbow and begun to lead. I planted my feet, and the ships get it under me, the old, elegant slide of the big body and weather. Something inside said my name again, and this time it was right. The belt creeped like an old book spun. Inside the mouth, there was not a bow, a glow rose that was not light, but memory. I saw shapes in fog, seats that looked like benches, and then pews again with numbers carved into ends. All the numbers the same, 12 cut deep enough to outlast refinishing. I heard the murmur count of a muster, roll call performed by people whose names had fallen out of the list. I heard a laugh that almost was my sister's laugh, and almost was a wave hitting itself. I reached in the fabric of the world, got thin in my fingers like wet paper. Nadia's voice came again, closer. She said, "Here like a person at the top of a stair you cannot not see." When I asked where, she said with a breath that felt like it touched my face, "The storm climbed us." Group pulled the other boats closer in their cradles and yelled to each other in the functional music of urgent work. Her cabin key. I grabbed it, and the key slipped against my palm as a slick with something that was not for me. I said no out loud, which is a word that fits its many locks, and hauled back on the belt with all the dull animal strength here gives you. The canvas tore, not gracefully, not along the seam. It ripped like the first rip in an old shirt, with a sound that suggested something had been waiting. Water poured from the slit, not rain-warred by colder and brinier, and with it came a smell like rope that has known too many storms. The darkness inside recoiled, not from the light, but from the open, like it preferred rules. I shoved the tar back and back, palms burning, until one got leverage and tried to help. I crewmen swore a pair into the storm and threw a line. Then another, then stopped, eyes in the dark like someone who did not want the answer to be visible. The shape inside tried to form a boat and failed. The sides moved like flanks, and then like curtains, and then like water again. I saw handprints press outward along the inside of the tarp where I had not cut. Too many, too small, and too large. They rose and fell with a rhythm that did not match the sea. I will not tell you I saw my sister's face, because I did not. What I saw was the idea of her in the way fabric bulged and retreated, and in the boat or threshold or mouth chose to be still. The storm walked past, in the way storms do, deciding it had made its point. The crew hauled me away with a furnace that felt like love and reprimand. They released the canvas with quick hands and eyes that did not meet mine. An officer with rain in his eyelashes told me it was not safe to interfere with emergency equipment, and I laughed in a way that made him look at his shoes. The belt cut had bruised my wrist ugly. Nada's keys sat on my tongue like a coin while I tried to decide if anything I had done had been real. Morning was gentle and stupid with sunlight. The lifeboats hung neat in their rows, white and shining. Keela's cover looked ordinary again. No tir, no stun. No sign that a knight had tried to teach it how to be a throat. Death Services printed me a letter that said my reservation had been updated and now showed one guest. They thanked me for choosing this line and offered me an onboard credit that felt like a joke for someone else. The security officer walked me through the lobby past the ship model where 12 little orange boats sat perfect. I counted them and got 11 without trying. I left a note in the cabin for whoever would come after me. Do not stand near 12 during drills. Do not let anyone assign you there. If your card says 12, tear it up and go where a lot of people are. I seal Nadia's key in an envelope with a note you would write if you wanted to believe in return. Before I set it down, I went back to the deck one last time and looked at the canvas. The sun made its gray look kind. That is how kindness works when it is painted over something else. As I turned away, a hamper ant pressed outward from under the tarp, small and earnest, like a child learning an alphabet through touch. It faded fast, drawn back the way a breath draws back when you get scared that someone heard it. A crew member nearby pretended to be busy with a cleat and never looked up. A call screened once and stopped, like it had changed its mind. The ropes around 12 were new by afternoon, and the mustard schedule slid back into that firm voice that makes you think nothing ever happens that is not planned. If you sail and they stamp your card with a red 12, ask to change. If they say overflow, say no. If the cover shifts on a still day, treat it the way you would treat an elevator that opens to a wall. Do not get inside to be polite. Night. And if you hear your name called anywhere near that canvas, remember that absence can be louder than a horn. It counts in the quiet and paints over what it cannot count. That is why Lifeboat 12 never launched. It never has to. It only opens. Story 5. Midnight muster on Deck 9. The announcement woke me like a slap, hard and clean, and not in the captain's voice. All passengers report to Deck 9 for muster. The Pete, Deck 9 immediate. The speaker crackled with a wet breath between words, and the room grew colder as if the air itself wanted to go somewhere else. I'm a night nurse. I know orders when I hear them, and I know when a room changes temperature without the thermostat moving. I laced my shoes and stepped into the corridor before my brain could invent a reason to stay, because hesitation is how people die, and always. Deck 9 should have been pool chairs and sleepy security, but the deck guys stepped on to felt like a hospital at 3 a.m., all humming lights, and a smell that says machines live here. The sea was a shadow. The emergency lamps pulsed in threes, as if counting was the point. 20 people gathered under a sign that read Muster C in a font that makes adults behave. That was far too few for a ship this size. Nobody wore life jackets. Kits. Nobody looked like they knew what to do if this was real, which made it feel more real. I clipped word lay on a steel table with a pen tied to it like a leash. No crew. The emergency lamps pulsed in threes, as if counting was the point. 20 people gathered under a sign that read Muster C in a font that makes adults behave. That was far too few for a ship this size. Nobody wore life jackets. Kits. Nobody looked like they knew what to do if this was real, which made it feel more real. I clipped word lay on a steel table with a pen tied to it like a leash. No crew. The first 5 names answered when I called, and that small compliance felt like finding a pulse on a wrist you expected to be empty. Then the intercom corrected me. It said the same sentence, only the voice was wrong. The vowels dragged like a wire pulled through water. All passengers report to Deck 9 for muster. Hipachi. The emergency lights flickered 3 times and stopped. Each flick landed like a door closing in another part of the building. A woman beside me touched my sleeve and whispered that her husband had just been here, his hands on her shoulders, and then the lights had blinked and her hands were empty. Her voice tried to sound calm. It sounded like stale air leaving a room. The list renames I did not hear in the crowd. Harlan, May, Carver, and aimed twice, once with a line through it as if someone who knew pins had crossed it out and then written it against offer. The wet smell rose like damp rope in a closet. My own name sat clean on the second page, printed twice, one crossed, one waiting. Someone had written a small line beside the second copy, as if the deck itself had a preference. I touched the ink with a fingertip like we do with labels at 4 a.m., trying to feel the difference between wrong and wrong enough. When the lamps blinked again, 3 quick flashes, the crowd hiccuped. The teenager with the string backpack vanished, while his mother was still saying his name, syllables pulled short. I ran to the rail as if there would be splash logic because bodies fall toward water. The sea kept its face. The air stung my eyes and smelled like metal cooled too fast. I told the mother to breathe with me because lungs are the only engines you can fix with counting, and she did. And then she asked me where he went, and I did not have a word I would use in charting. A man in a robe said Deck 9 did not exist on the ship, and he had checked the plans by the elevator because he is the kind of man who checks plans. "This is Deck 8, he said, and held up his hands the way you do when you want to point at something, but there is nothing to point at. Another woman said, Deck 9, as the crew Jin, that her cousin worked on a sister ship and told her. A child tied up my sleeve and asked why the floor was wet if it was not raining. I looked down and saw footprints glistening and leading away, 3 by 3, as if someone had risen from a pool and walked toward the dark. Procedure said, stay, Pope. My bones said move. The intercom cleared its throat and spoke my name once, then again with a small correction in the middle like practicing. Report to Deck 9. It added, and the emergency lights flickered 3 times politely. I'm tired of being told I see patterns. Sometimes patterns see you back. I raised the clipboard and called roll again, louder. 10 voices answered with too much relief. I called the names that were not present and waited for something to answer anyway. The pen shook against the paper. Somewhere a door I could not see locked itself. I'm tired of being told I see patterns. Sometimes patterns see you back. I raised the clipboard and called roll again, louder. 10 voices answered with too much relief. I called the names that were not present and waited for something to answer anyway. The pen shook against the paper. Somewhere a door I could not see locked itself. The intercom said muster again, and this time the word was wrong. The S dragged, the T bitten off, as if TT had learned to help. I stood at the lip of the shadow and counted my own pulse. 7 to 8, 7 to 8. The lights flickered in 3s again, and the man with a rosary ring said his own name like a life jacket, and then went quite mid-silber the way monitors do when a line flattens and the alarm waits a beat before it does its job. I did a thing I teach new nurses never to do. I stepped away from the group. The footprints glow just enough to pretend they were offering a route. The air in the shadow was colder and tasted like the inside of a freezer you have defrosted by beating it with a spoon. The deck underfoot felt rubberized, the way floors do, and wards were falling as expected. Somewhere, metal flexed in a long, tired groan, and the sound carried a soft extra under it, like a voice practicing a word at the back of a throat. The list in my hand scratched my palm. The cross copy of my name rubbed the paper smooth where pen has pressed too long. I thought of the patient who refused to charge because the elevator doors looked like a mouth. I thought of the manager who told me I find patterns in wallpaper and call him Matt. I said my name to the air the way you press a dressing until the bleed stops, and the intercom said it back to me with a vowel half-step flatter, like a musician learning a song that never charts. When the lights blinked again, 3 neat beats, the argument behind me ended because there were not enough voices left to argue. The woman whose husband had been on her shoulders stood alone with her hands, still holding air. She looked at me like I had a syringe that would fix this, and I looked at her like I would take the shot first to show it was safe. Life. The wet footprints brightened as if new feed had joined the procession. I bent and pressed my fingers to one. It was not water only. It was salt in a thin slick of something like the gel we used to pick up heartbeats, and when I straightened, the smell of it stayed. Deck 9, the intercom said, and the word had a gravity now as if naming created a place. Report. It added my name twice, one crisp, one softer, like an echo taught to speak. The ticking element in my head went from minutes to seconds. I had a choice I could not embody. Answer and step into the part of the deck that was not the deck, or refuse and wait for the lights to erase me in threes while I did nothing except insist it was practical. I answered. Yes, I said, the way you say it when a doctor calls your name at the end of a hallway and you want to live like a person who complies. The air shifted. The shadow opened in the gentlest motion I have ever seen, like hands parting a curtain, and I saw a space that looked like deck 9 if he drew it from memory and got the washing of color wrong. The muster sign wore the same font, but the letters blood. The lifeboat outlines hung where they should, but they were line drawings only, pencil on dark paper. The footprints went right and then did not come out. The clipboard in my hand wrote something without my help. As Small Chuck appeared beside the second copy of my name, the first remained crossed, a scar on the page. I stepped into air that did not fit my lungs at first, the way oxygen tasted wrong after a code. The deck stretched away with a tilt that did not match the ship's motion. People stood in clusters, repeating names to each other like prayers, and every time the light stuttered in threes, a cluster thinned and did not look surprised. There was a man whose wet hair dripped onto his shoulders and never finished dripping. I told myself this could still be a drill. I told myself the crew would appear with megaphone and good cheer and apologies for the confusion. I told myself my brain was engaging in the old night shift trick of making a story out of fatigue and fluorescence. Then I saw the clipboard on the other table, the one I had not noticed because the light around it bent. It held a list of names that did not belong to the sailing. Dates beside them that were months ago. I call them header that said completed in a hand that suggested comfort. Then my name, written in that column once already an entire diagonal, like a nurse's note at 5 a.m. I have been here before. The knowledge arrived like fever breaking. Not memory exactly, body knowing. I taste in my mouth of toothpaste from brand I do not own and a song stack in my head that I have never shazaned because I need the title once. Deck 9 is where they call the ones who never disembarked. Not because we were lost at sea, because the count was wrong, and the ship keeps a ledger as carefully as I keep intake and out, but on a patient who holds fluid. You can step off with your suitcase and still leave something behind that knows the route back. Report, the intercom said, and the voice did not need to be human anymore, because the word was. It called my name twice again, and this time both versions sounded correct, like a set of lungs agreeing. The lights prepared their 3-step erase. I turned to the woman whose hands remembered her husband's shoulders. Hold on to me, I said, because that is an order I know how to give. We linked elbows like girls crossing streets. The wet foot burns that our feet multiplied, as if consent created a track, and the Justimo rose with them like a tide finding new reach. The deck tilted toward a point that was not the bow. The muster signs began to drift on their chains, moving without wind. The lifeboat outlined shivered like paper in humid air. I thought if I could reach the rail on the real side, maybe I could reach my body, which deck it stood on. I took a step and fell of a tug at my name, out my arm, out my jacket, my name, the way labels pull at you from the inside when they're stuck on wrong. I said my name out loud twice, the way the intercom did, first the cross version, then the waiting one, and the pull ease as if I had satisfied a dual entry. Consequence is a patient teacher. The immediate one was that my voice returned to my chest like a bird shocked by glass. Pass. The delayed echo came from a clipboard as a new check appeared without my hand. The woman at my elbow breathed back in her shape and said her husband's name without breaking. And he did not return, but the space he had occupied stopped brightening like a leaving door. The lights ran their 3 flickers and found nothing to take from our small radius. I felt the idea of a threshold pass under my feet, like a shadow moving clouds. Time, the intercom said, or maybe it said 9 again, and I heard the word I needed. The deck folded its angles with an exhausted courtesy, and the smell of gel and salt dropped from sharp to faint. I walked us backward until the shadow was shadow again, and the rail met my hand with cold I trusted. The emergency lamps blinked 3 more times for principle and settled into a hum. The speaker clicked off like a throat swallowing. The clipboard in my hand weighed less than it had a minute ago, the way a tray does after you divide the meds. Back in my cabin, don't try to practice its grammar on the sky. My clock said 558. The mirror showed a nurse with ocean hair and a paper cut on her finger from a list that did not want to be read. My mustard card lay on the desk with a stamp I had not noticed until now. Deck 9, and red over the place where mascots and logos pretend to make you safe. I lifted it and found a second card beneath with my name printed once and crossed in a neat line. The ship announced breakfast like normal. I listened for wobble and the bells and heard none. On the carpet, near the bed, the wet footprints had returned. They led from the side where I had slept to the door and grew to 3, then 3 again, and then a final set that stopped at the threshold as if someone had reconsidered. The air smelled like salt held in a palm, and the space above the duvet had a coolness that implies someone stood there very still and watched me sleep. I touched the first print with my fingertips. The gel lifted like a memory you do not want but cannot say no to, and I wiped it on a towel that will never feel clean again. If you're called to muster at midnight, check the deck plan, and if deck 9 is not on it, count the people with you and do not let them drift. If the lights insist on 3s, hold a wrist and say a name like you mean to return it. If your name appears twice on a list, cross one out yourself and choose the other before speaker does it for you. And if you wake and see what prints leading away from your bed, do not follow. The ship knows how to count, and it will keep calling those who balance its books. And that concludes tonight's voyage into the dark places ships never list on their brochures. From missing names on the manifest, to doors that open where no hole we should exist, to lifeboats that never launch. Each of these tales reminds us that the ocean keeps its own ledgers, and some deaths are collected long after midnight. If you made it this far, thank you for listening in the dark with me. Remember, sometimes the scariest stories aren't in the waves outside, but in the still that carries us over them. Sleep lightly tonight, because echoes travel farther on water.